All believers agree that God is omniscient. That is, he knows all things. We can all agree that God knows the past and the present absolutely perfectly. However, there is debate on how God relates to the future. One view holds that God has determined all future events. So that would mean that God knows the future as settled because he has determined the future to be that way. A second view holds that man has genuine choice, but God knows the future as settled. But if you thought about these perspectives long enough, you would eventually realize that God would be at least partially responsible for evil. Think about it. Either God knew of the evil that was to occur and let it happen, or worse, he determined the evil to happen. Perhaps the Bible teaches neither of these perspectives. Maybe the Bible teaches that the future is not settled. To find out, let's look a little closer. God chose to create a world that includes creatures with genuine free will. What this means is that our choices have a genuine effect on how the future unfolds. Or to put it differently, the future does not yet exist because the future depends on the choices of free individuals. From this perspective, God would still be omniscient, but the reality that he knows is made up of some things that are definite and some things that are possibilities. God is the creator, so he knows of every possibility. But since he has given some creatures free will choices can affect which possibilities become reality. This view, which is called open theism, affirms the infinite magnitude of God's intelligence and knowledge. It is simply that God has given some creatures freedom to choose, and this freedom necessitates that existence is partially made up of possibilities. Let's look at some scriptures that demonstrate that the future is unsettled and that the future depends on free will choices. In Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 to 7, it says that after the Lord saw how wicked man had become, he was sorry that he had made man and was grieved in his heart. Can you genuinely regret something that you determined or already knew would happen? But from the open perspective, this passage would demonstrate the difference between anticipating a possibility and experiencing it actually. Of course, God anticipated that man could become utterly sinful, but it wasn't until it became a reality that God experienced the very real emotion of regret. In Exodus chapter 32, verses 10 to 14, God became so angry at Israel's sin that he decided to destroy Israel and start over again with Moses. Moses reminded God of his covenant obligations to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the fact that if he did destroy Israel, the Egyptians would have reason to criticize God. Verse 14 says, "So the Lord changed his mind about the harm which he said he would do to his people." Reading this verse from the first perspective that I mentioned earlier, we would have to conclude that God already ordained to not destroy Israel and was being insincere when he declared that he would. Or from the second view, God already knew that he was not going to destroy Israel and again was being insincere when he declared that he would destroy Israel. In either case, the whole exchange between God and Moses would be a charade. But from the open view, this is an exchange between free persons who are co-creating the future. Moses had a real effect on God's decisions, and this shows us that our prayers can have a real effect on God as well. There are plenty more examples we can look at to demonstrate that the future is unsettled and that man's interaction with God has a real effect on the future. Very quickly, I can point you to the story of God declaring that Hezekiah would die. Hezekiah then pleaded with God to let him live, so God added 15 years to his life. This story in 2 Kings chapter 20 verses 1 to 7 again demonstrates that God certainly has intentions, but his plans can change based on decisions of free creatures. God's plans can change because the future is not settled. Or what about the story of Jonah? God declared through Jonah that Nineveh would be destroyed. Even though God declared that they would be destroyed, it says in Jonah chapter 3 verse 10, God relented concerning the calamity which he declared he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. That is, he did not destroy Nineveh. If the future was settled, then this whole exchange would have been an act on God's part. But if the future is unsettled, then God can truly react to repentance. Even Jesus demonstrated that the future is unsettled when he said in Matthew chapter 26 verse 39, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." The death of the Messiah is one of the many things that God did indeed foreordain to happen. But from Jesus' own perspective, it was not necessarily set in stone that things would absolutely have to go that way. At the very least, Jesus models for us that it is appropriate to approach God in such a way to presuppose that the future is not settled, but is made up of possibilities. Open theism allows God to be sovereign and still allow for free will. It's simply a way to understand how both can be true. The open view allows for genuine relationships since the future does not yet exist, and things genuinely depend on cooperation with God to bring about his plan. The future is made up of real possibilities, and each of us contributes to what the future will be. The traditional views can lead down a path where prayer becomes ultimately irrelevant, and what you do becomes irrelevant since the future is already settled. But if the future is open, if the future is unsettled, then we can work with God to see the future realized. Remember, God has infinite intelligence and has complete knowledge of all future possibilities. But again, free will choice has a genuine effect on which possibilities become reality. For more videos, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also visit youtube.com/messianicniagara to subscribe there. Visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/messianicniagara. And don't forget to visit our website, messianicniagara.com.